Kevin Costner built empires on film, but he couldn't keep a single home together. The man who kept Whitney Houston safe and The Bodyguard saw two marriages fall apart in court. The director of Field of Dreams lost $80 million to his first marriage and then saw the same thing happen again 30 years later. 7 kids, 3 wives, 2 terrible divorces, and a lot of money spent attempting to get the one thing that fame could never give him. At 70, the famous person who taught Hollywood how to dream is still looking for something he lost long before anybody knew his name. But the money and the publicity aren't the actual tragedies. It is what happened to the boy who never stopped moving and the man who never learned how to stay. He starts his journey in a leased house in California with a sibling he never met. It breaks my heart to think that the man whose quiet strength would one day impact millions started his existence in a world of anguish he couldn't describe. Kevin Michael Costner was born in Linwood, California, on January 18, 1955. William Costner's youngest son was a ditch digger who would later become a powerline technician. His mother, Sharon Ray, was a social worker whose delicate hands carried the weight of strangers' grief every day. Their house was little, the furniture was old, and the walls were weak enough that winter could come in without being invited. But love was there, steadfast and wordless, holding the family together even when everything else seemed like it might come apart. The Costner family had already changed because of a tragedy 2 years before Kevin was born. Mark Douglas, his sibling, only lasted for 1 day before his tiny heart stopped beating. It was the kind of quiet loss that alters everything, yet no one ever talks about it. From then on, love in the house was strong and protected. Bill became stricter because he wanted to keep his other son safe from a world he no longer trusted. Sharon got quieter, hiding her sadness in lengthy looks and careful movements. Kevin would sometimes find her standing still in the kitchen, staring at an empty area like she was watching a ghost that only she could see. In those moments, his father would stop talking and clutch the table with forceful hands, as if he were trying to keep the family together by pure will. That absence was like a shadow in the air. And maybe it was in that silent sadness that Kevin first heard what suffering sounds like when it doesn't cry. He had packed up more of his life into boxes by the time he was 12 than most adults ever will. The Costners were always on the road, looking for a job that was always just a town away. Compton, Ventura, Visalia, and Orange County. He moved to a new school, met new people, and said goodbye to old friends, but he never learned how to fit in. The sound of packaging tape was the music of his boyhood. He was never the noisy child, the best athlete, or the one teachers remembered at the end of the year. He was the shy kid in the back of the room who penned poems instead of answers and said farewell to communities that never knew he was there. Kevin sat in the back seat one night and watched street lights flash by like memories he couldn't keep. He didn't cry. He just learned to let go before anything could hang on. But something unshakable grew in that quiet pain. He believed that he could still construct something that would last, even if the world didn't see him. Finally, in high school, he grew to 6 feet tall. But the actual growth happened inside. His voice shook with desire in church choirs. He penned poems about the sky and second opportunities at night. He dreamed of locations where the ground didn't move under his feet and stories that didn't need to be put in boxes. His father's strictness showed him the way. His mother's faith was the base of his life. Every time he said farewell, he got stronger. Every time he was quiet, he learned to listen more closely. He learned early on that life doesn't owe you anything. It simply gives you chances to start over. Kevin Costner would get the courage to go after a dream that scared him from those chances. A fantasy that would take away all he thought he desired and offer him everything he never dreamed he would lose. How much does a dream cost when you're 23, married, broke, and can't settle down? The cost was everything for Kevin Costner. Safety, certainty, and the modest pride of a young man who didn't want to let down the people who cared about him. He did what every good kid should do in 1978, just after getting his marketing degree from California State University Fitton. He got a job that paid well. Every morning, he buttoned his shirt, smiled at the world, and felt a small part of himself slip behind a desk. The paychecks were always on time. The future was easy to see. But the quietness inside him was loud. He didn't care about numbers. It dwelt in stories and places that no one else could see. He started to realize that safety was a gradual form of death somewhere between the buzzing of typewriters and the bright lights. Then fate stepped in, and it looked like Richard Burton. It was just a normal flight home from their honeymoon. Normal until Kevin looked to his right and saw one of the best performers in the world seated next to him. It felt like fate had taken a seat between them. He nervously told a secret that had been eating away at him for years. He wanted to do something, but he was too scared to try. Burton looked at him for a long time before giving him a simple promise that Kevin would remember for the rest of his life. When the jet landed and Burton's limo drove away, the famous actor leaned out the window and wished him luck. Those 2 words broke something that could never be fixed. Kevin resigned his work in a matter of weeks. He was cleaning boats, driving trucks, and giving tours of movie stars' homes within a few months, even though he could barely afford rent. He walked for miles to save money on the bus. When the heat went out, he slept in his clothes. He tried out for parts again and over, but was always turned down and was once again invisible. He got his first job in a movie that he was embarrassed to be in for years. He got a part in the big CHNL, but every scene he was in was deleted from the final version. He sat alone at that premiere, knowing that no one would ever know he had been there. Hollywood acted like he didn't exist for 6 horrible years. But the boy who had to start again every time he got in trouble learned how to stay alive. Lawrence Kasdan, the same director who had once cut Kevin from a movie, asked him to be in Silverado in 1985. Things changed when the cameras started rolling. People noticed. Hollywood took note. The door that had never opened finally opened all the way. He became famous after the 1987 movie The Untouchables. People loved him after Bull Durham in 1988. Field of Dreams made him famous in 1989. Then came the bet that would shape his whole career. In 1990, Kevin put his own money on the line to direct and star in Dancers with Wolves, a 3-hour western that was partly in Lakota and that every studio executive said would end his career. Storms wrecked the sets. The budget went out of control. The newspapers called it Kevin's Gate and said it would be a disaster. The movie made $424 million and won 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. The boy from Linwood had never belonged anyplace before, but now he had. But success usually comes at a cost. And Kevin Costner was about to find out how much glory can take away from a man who was everything but the one thing he has always wanted. Fame came like a deluge and killed the life Kevin Costner had constructed before anybody recognized his name. He was omnipresent by the early 1990s. Covers of magazines, red carpets, and movie sets that needed 16-hour days. Even though reviewers made fun of Robin Hood's accent, he made $390 million. The Bodyguard became a huge hit, making over $400 million and selling 50 million copies of its soundtrack. He was getting between $10 and $20 million for each movie. He was one of the highest-paid performers in Hollywood and seemed to be in charge of the whole industry. But the hands that won Oscars couldn't keep his marriage together. Before anyone else, Cindy Silva had faith in him. When there was nothing else to stand by, she had stood by him. She had waited through the frigid flats, the unsuccessful auditions, and the years when the dream didn't provide her anything. They had a family together, with Annie joining in 1984, Lily in 1986, and Joe in 1988. There were picnics in the California sun, birthday candles blown out around kitchen tables, and bedtime stories read in a voice that people had not yet learned to recognize. Love was enough to keep everything together for a while. But each movie took Kevin farther away from home. There was a new trip, a new hotel room, and another week where he could only hear his kids' voices over the phone instead of at the dinner table. Cindy took care of 3 kids in silent rooms while her husband smiled for cameras on faraway red carpets. She read about him in magazines she never bought and saw him become one of the most renowned men in the world. The man who used to come home smelling like paint and ambition suddenly smelled like faraway places and studio lights. There wasn't one time when trust broke. It gently faded away, like light at nightfall. The whispers of late nights and early proximity spread through the newspapers. Nothing is real, and everything is bad. They went to counseling. They attempted to stay apart. They attempted to remember who they were before celebrity changed the laws of their lives. But some breaks are too deep for memory to fix. They got a divorce in 1994, after 16 years of marriage. There was no prenuptial agreement, they just trusted each other. The payout was said to be $80 million, making it one of the most expensive divorces in Hollywood history. But Kevin would subsequently say that the actual cost wasn't money. It was hard to see his kids just half as much and realize that even the best things on television couldn't fix what distance had destroyed. That night, he packed boxes with words on them that used to mean something. Family, home, forever. Outside, flashbulbs went off like thunder far away. The silence within was so loud. The decline came quickly after that. Waterworld was expected to make his legacy last in 1995. Instead, it almost killed him. Hurricanes destroyed sets. The budgets went up to $235 million. In one scene, Kevin almost drowned while tethered to a mast as waves slammed over him. Crew members grabbed him out of the ocean at the last minute because they thought they had lost him. Before the movie ever came out, the tabloids ripped him apart and called it Kevin's Gate. In 1997, when The Postman won the Razzie Awards for Worst Picture and Worst Actor, the same industry that had made him famous turned its back on him. Scripts stopped coming. The phone stopped ringing. Kevin Costner felt invisible for the first time in years, just like he did when he was a kid. But the youngster, who had learned how to fit his life into boxes, knew something that Hollywood never would. He knew how to begin over. Kevin threw himself into work when his first marriage ended in disaster and he was publicly humiliated. He thought that moving on would help him forget about his loss. Then love slowly came back to him. In 1996, he had a short relationship with Bridget Rooney that led to the birth of his son Liam. Kevin was unsure at first because he wasn't sure if he could be a decent father in another difficult situation. But as soon as the truth came out, he stepped up right away to show support and make sure his son never felt like an outcast. The relationship didn't last, but there was no hard feelings when it ended. Liam grew up knowing his father had honored his commitment. Then Christine Baumgartner showed up. They met in 1998, but by 2002 they had grown apart because she wanted kids and Kevin was afraid of starting again. They got back together when Kevin realized he couldn't envision his life without her. Under the Colorado sky in September 2004, they got married at his property in Aspen. She came in a carriage pulled by horses. He stood under a canopy of light, tears in his eyes, and told a friend that he never imagined he would get this chance again. They worked for almost 19 years to build what seemed like paradise. Caden, Hayes, and Grace turned the ranch into a fairy tale for 3 children. In the winter, there were snow forts, in Santa Barbara, there were beach days, and at night, there were movie evenings with popcorn all over the floor. Kevin wasn't playing a hero for the first time in decades. He was living like one, but heaven doesn't burn. It erodes. By the early 2020s, work had taken the place of love in the places it used to fill. It took months to film Yellowstone on site. Horizon took all of his money, time, and eventually his tranquility. Christine kept the family together even though she felt invisible in a life that everyone else wanted. She wanted to be there. He gave her security, and love that was starving for attention started to fade into silence. She filed for divorce in May 2023. What happened next was not a quiet falling apart, but a show for everyone to see. Fights for custody, property, and child support that made the news for months. Under the provisions of a prenuptial agreement, she had to leave their Santa Barbara home. It suddenly seemed colder than glass. Then there were pictures of Christine with a man who Kevin had once thought was a friend. Pictures that made heartbreak feel sharper. He told his friends that he still loved her. But there are some things that you can't unsee. Kevin Costner saw a family he had formed fall apart in courtrooms for the second time. 3 mothers, 7 children, and 2 terrible divorces. And nevertheless, under the rubble, the same tenacious hope that had kept him going since he was a youngster. The notion that this time beginning afresh would ultimately take him to a place where he could stay. Kevin Costner has lost more than most individuals would ever have at the age of 70. Still, he stands not at the top of the mountain, but somewhere beyond it, where the vista is calmer and the air is thin. In 2003, Open Range brought back memories of the man they used to look up to. In 2018, Yellowstone reminded them of why they had never forgotten. Kevin played a role who was quite similar to John Dutton, the weathered grandfather who was battling to protect what could not be replaced. The show became the most popular drama on cable TV, with 16 million viewers and over $1 million every episode. He came back to life at the age of 63. A few actors ever see. But he never used numbers to judge. Horizon, a huge Western epic he had been working on since 1988, was the dream that wouldn't die. He put $38 million of his own money into the project, took out a loan on his house, and brought his son Hayes with him. When the first installment came out at Cannes in 2024, reviews were split, and the movie didn't make back its money at the box office. Kevin smiled anyhow. He wasn't looking for approval. He was keeping a commitment he made to himself. The losses along the road have been bigger than anyone could see. His parents died within a few years of each other, leaving with them the support that had kept him stable since he was a toddler. Most people didn't know how much Whitney Houston's death in 2012 hurt. He trusted in her when no one else did, kept her safe on the set of The Bodyguard, and developed a bond based on trust. He broke down in tears at her funeral as he informed the world that she had always been enough. The words he said that day still ring in my ears as a gentle tribute to a woman who deserved more time than life gave her. At 70, his body is paying the price for years of filming the truth. The back hurts from falling off a horse. Every frosty morning, the knees fight. The hands shake a little when the wind blows through the aspen trees on the mountain. But he still gets up before dawn. Still goes for hikes on the ranch. Still writes, directs, and dreams. Awards and box office profits don't tell the whole story of his legacy. There are 7 kids that live in different decades, and each one carries a bit of his adventure. Annie went into creating movies after him. Lily got his love of music from him. Hayes rides next to him on set, learning the trade his father almost gave up before it even started. Kevin Costner famously said that family is not just a chapter, it's the full book. He is still working on his. The boy from Linwood who put his life in boxes ultimately made something he doesn't have to leave behind. Not the ranch, not the money, but the proof that a man can break, rebuild, and still be strong when the sun goes down. His narrative is not a sad one. It shows that difficulty is not the antithesis of grace, but the road to it. That dreams are not made of comfort, but of hard work. And that the people who fell the hardest sometimes get the highest. Kevin Costner is still here at 70, still writing, and still thinking that there is a place worth reaching beyond the next horizon.